limit after a
Yeah.
while.
Yeah, and then you have to do all the tech yourself. And with these people, you can just email them, have them have them help with the tech. Some quizzes is really nice. Ability to do quizzes, even if they're not for a grade.
Right, right.
And polls, and to do kind of separation of different constituencies.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have one constituency, like everyone needs to do this one module.
Mm-hmm.
But then they need to break apart into different groups so that they can do that pretty easily. They will never know that, but we know where they're going.
Okay. So what about, do you ever have an opportunity where you need folks on a live conference call, or do you run that outside of your learning platform?
The learning platform that can accommodate that tends to be Ruzuku, because you can have a Zoom meeting directly through Ruzuku, but they're a little more limited in their other capabilities. So what I usually do is just have a Zoom meeting like this.
Okay. Separate,
right. I don't know if in Thinkific, if you can run that within the group or not.
No, so, when we were looking, when Terrell wanted to get this on something, I kind of started looking to some on learning platforms, and I put it initially on, some of it on Thinkific and Teachable. They're both pretty they're similar.
Yeah, they're all similar.
Yeah, but neither of them did the ability to do a live conference call interactive. I think that most of them are saying, in a sense, there's enough tools out there that do it separately, and it's too complex to add it to ours.
What about integrations? Does it have easy integrative capacity?
Like what kind of integrations would you be looking for?
Okay, so it's suggesting that you basically go off platform to do, the conferencing or whatever, but does it have any ability to have a plug-in to where that's more easily executed or anything like that?
You do a link. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Sylvia.
You can do a link, so you can link your Zoom conference call into an item. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't give you a scheduler where you can say, person at 2:00 on so-and-so. It would almost be a text lesson where you would put in the text saying, at 2:00 on such and such date, connect to this Zoom conference.
Gotcha.
Or you can email. Now, a lot of them have the email. This Thinkific have the email. I know Teachable did, but email out to your
yeah, they all have that capability.
You can email to the students the link and say, hey, at this time, meet so-and-so. Did that help, Tara?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, so basically we'd have to just, figure out workarounds, but it's not, because I come from a pretty, I've developed software from the ground up, and then I worked for companies that use Salesforce and things like that, and basically jerry-rigged it, completely brought it down and bring it back up to customize it and all sorts of different things like that. So I think about these opportunities for integration, and some systems do it so much better than others. Hey, John.
Hey, good morning.
Hey, Jose.
Hey.
Morning.
So let's get everybody acquainted.
Yeah.
I'm probably the only common denominator, but I'm assuming that everybody is seeing the Brady Bunch set up here. And so Katie playing the role of Marsha is over here to our left. And, she is the director of online, say your
director of online learning for DSF.
Director of online learning for DSF. And all things fantastically DSF. Right below her is Reverend Dr. John Bergquist.
Hello.
And then a part of the Empower team is Sylvia, who is a remarkable church planter, but equally as remarkable as a church planter, she is an amazing project manager, and she's helping us to, she's keeping us boys in line related to everything that we're doing, just cracking the whip. And then in addition, Reverend Dr. Jose Martinez out of Kansas City. So we were all three supposed to have amazing barbecue last night. We'll have to postpone that.
Terrell, where are you this morning?
I'm in Indianapolis, and tomorrow, like all of my plans this week got flipped upside down. So I finally were able to get a flight to North Carolina in the morning. So
are you having a polar vortex resurgence?
It's all of that. Like Mother Nature is doing her thing. So but we're all safe, and you know, all things work together for the good of them who love him.
Out here, we've had bad storms. It rained 2 days in a row, and it was only in the 50s.
Oh gosh, we're gonna be in prayer for you guys.
Thank you,
man. So again, thanks for everyone's flexibility, and John, you know, I'm sorry we weren't able to make that happen, to get together and everything.
We'll do that again someday.
Yeah. Next time I'm just gonna come to California because that's really where I wanted to be. And if I had just done that, then we would have been all right. Okay, so we, you know, ideally we would have spent last night getting more acquainted, and now we kind of have a truncated time. Let me just give the whole team the background of how this all came to be. John and I had the pleasure of lunch together a few weeks ago during the development conference, the Disciples Development Conference. Where were we?
New Orleans.
And we were in in New Orleans a few weeks ago and started just talking about, you know, our worlds, and found that there might be some great places for those to collide. And so as DSF is developing their online presence and their certificate programs, and I was talking to him about the project that we refer to as Empower, which is our church planting equipping platform, then thought, let's get together and talk more about if, you know, and how we should do this together. Is there anything you'd like to add, John?
Disciple Seminary Foundation really started to come together about 60 years ago. And the primary motivator was that nobody knew really how to do new church starts in the wild, brand new diversity of 1950s Southern California. And so that's been in our DNA from the start, is how to build not only the skills, but the cultural competence to do new church starts and do that well in service of the church. For the last 8 years, we've run a weekly group or monthly group called Seed Planters to work with seminarians who are interested in revitalization or new church starts. Terrell's been one of our speakers, and we've had a good number of speakers over the years. And we've had several congregations start out of our students who are working through that process. So as DSF, we're working with 115 disciple students in degree programs up and down the West Coast. But we're also working with 115 certificate students, mostly in a commissioned ministry track. Most of those people are working with new church. Maybe it's new church planting, or it's a church that's less than 5 years old. I have 115 people working in Spanish for that certificate. We'll be moving that into English soon. And we're also looking at ways to expand an online presence. And one of the things we've been requested to do by a couple of regions is do a certificate in new church planting. So that's kind of an area of growth for us. And I never want to compete with another part of the church. I'd rather work together. So Katie's been with us for
7 months or so.
Yeah. And we've been launching a series of free webinars, kind of working out the tech and the logistics. We have a partnership with Week of Compassion that will produce a webinar within 2 weeks.
Yeah, soon, March 5th.
And Brendan Robertson down at Mission Gathering San Diego is presenting on his book, True Inclusion, also in the next few weeks. Our intent is to move that up to multi-webinar courses and then to full certificate programs online. And we'd love to have some of those ready to announce by GA. So, and I think one of the things that we've brought to our certificate programs, unlike some of the other certificate programs in the church, is we're very conscious about building a community. This is not just about one individual learning stuff to use by themselves. We bring together groups. We do our insight or online instruction in ways that people start to work together and depend on each other and stay connected when the class or the workshop's over. It's part of our commitment that one-shot education can impart a lot of facts, but it's not what makes the real difference.
That's good. That's really good.
So from talking with Terrell and knowing what the group's been doing, I think we have a number of shared values and interests.
Yeah,
and
sounds
a number of distinct resources.
Great. I think one question I have is, what were the factors involved that led to the decision to start your certificate program in Spanish?
Actually, through the, starting in the late 90s, we worked with Pacific School of Religion to offer a Southern California certificate for commissioned ministers in English. And for a number of years, that reached a decent population, strongly Samoan, in partnership with the UCC. And that went on for a good decade. And as the English-speaking group was fading out, we saw the opportunity to work with Casa de Oración in San Diego to create something in Spanish. And so we started that before I got here, we started it in 2010 with about a dozen students. And as I say, it's now gone up to 115.
Wow.
We have classes we have both a first level certificate and a second level diploma. We have classes meeting in San Diego, in Claremont, and as of last fall in Portland. We now have 35 Spanish-speaking disciples in Portland, Oregon, who are in our class. And almost all of those are from relatively new churches, and more than half of that group is wanting to start new churches.
Well, I think this is super important to understand, because now this just says to me that whatever we do here in this work, like, we almost have to think bilingually from the very beginning.
Yes.
And fortunately, both of my colleagues are, speak Spanish. So that'll be very helpful. Can you back up even further and just help us understand what DSF is?
Yes. In the 50s, some church leaders recognized that we needed a West Coast seminary presence, in part because people who grew up in 40s and 50s Oklahoma and trained at Phillips came to Southern California and didn't get the culture. And a lot of what they didn't get was the racial variety and racial, I wouldn't say equality, but at least some steps toward parity that were happening at that time. In the 50s, most of our seminaries did not admit people of color. And it was obvious that in California that was not going to be a good long-term strategy. So the idea here was that we support our new churches and existing churches by finding a way to do seminary education for ministry that is inclusive. So we accepted people of all races from the start. We accepted women and men from the start. It wasn't until the late 80s that every disciple seminary accepted women. And I'm glad everyone's caught up now. But so we were working with that. There was talk about let's form our own disciple seminary, the same way that the denomination did at Phillips and Lexington and all those other places in centuries past. The idea that came and was the winning idea was not to do it ourselves, but to do it in partnership, in ecumenical partnership. So a Methodist seminary was looking for a new place to be. At the same time, we were looking at a place to start a disciple seminary presence. They had 3 places on their short list. We had 3 places on ours, and 1 place was held in common. And so what used to be Southern California School of Theology moved to become Claremont School of Theology, and the disciples built the first building on campus as dormitories for disciple students. We've had this almost 60-year partnership with Claremont School of Theology. Their ecumenical commitment is strong enough. They're the only one of the 13 Methodist seminaries to have ecumenism written into their founding documents. They consider themselves an ecumenical seminary connected to the United Methodist Church. And we've been here as long as they have. So over the years, so what that means is they offer the degree, we offer support. We help with extra education. We help our students network across the country. We do things that most seminaries don't do, like have groups on new church planting and invite leaders from across the church to come and meet our students. We offer guidance and mentoring. We have 8 mentors on staff, 9. You would know some people like Belva Brown Jordan, Jose Morales, Joanne Bynum, who started 2 new churches in her career, Clarence Johnson, Yolanda Norton. We have a lot of good people who are putting time and attention individually into our students, because we think that makes a big difference. And so that's what we do. We now do that at 5 different schools. Our largest group of students is in Claremont. We have agreements with 2 schools in the San Francisco Bay Area, Pacific School of Religion, where we've worked for 30 years, and then a newer connection with San Francisco Theological Seminary. We work with the School of Theology and Ministry in Seattle at Seattle University, and with Iliff School of Theology in Denver. All of those are like-minded schools with a long history of supporting disciples in ministry. All of them are partners who want to give a lot to disciples and who know how to do it. All of them are very diverse, progressive places. So we never built our own seminary. We own 1 small office building. We never built up the big library or bought the 16-acre property or any of those things that others were doing in the 50s. That's made us much more flexible. And if you're following disciple seminaries, you know that various places, Phillips sold one campus 20 years ago. Lexington sold its campus. CTS sold its campus and is renting back part of it. Being a landlord is not a good business for educators to be in. And most of our seminaries are trying to get out of that business. We were never in that business. So I think that's given us a lot more options. So that's the short version.
So when someone is exploring a seminary education, ideally they would look to a seminary, but DSF is not a seminary.
Right.
You cooperate with seminaries to do.
Yeah. I would say we're a network of 5 accredited seminaries.
Okay.
And we have connections to get people accepted and to do well at any of those 5. There are 2 definitions of seminary. One is a place that is involved in training pastors, and that's what we do. The other definition is one that's accredited and agrees to be government regulated. Our partner schools are government regulated, we aren't. And we've made the conscious decision, again, in the last decade, that that's where we want to be. Since we're not government regulated, I never have to ask any student about citizenship. A government regulated school has to do that, has to keep records, has to report it to Department of Education. We don't. And so there's a missional end to us not being the other kind of seminary.
Right, right. Can you help me understand what puts weight behind a certificate program? So what is the strength behind your certificate program versus if like DeCasa decided they just wanted to create their own?
Since we're considered one of the seven seminaries of the disciples, and we relate through Helm and Council on Theological Education, we are connected to the general church, and most regions will honor the things we do as certificate programs or specific classes we offer as not the same as a degree, but held to a lot of the same standards. For instance, in our certificate for commission ministry in Spanish, 3/4 of the professors hold PhDs and are tenured faculty at accredited seminaries throughout the United States and beyond. The others are senior pastors with MDivs and 20 years plus experience. You're getting a faculty that is roughly the same qualifications as you do if you go to any accredited seminary. An MDiv at one of our schools these days, though we provide a lot of financial support, and so do our partners, but the ticket price is $75,000 for the degree. At some other schools, they're pushing $100,000, $125,000. We can offer a 2-year certificate for $3,000. And that makes it accessible to a part of the church. A seminary that is getting money from tuition can't afford to do that. And that means they won't develop certificate programs at lower prices because it would compete with their essential business model.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can add to that too, John, my experience is that seminary certificate programs tend to be mini seminaries and not actually offer the robust material that is usable for certificate students. They tend to try to condense down a seminary class into a week or two.
Right.
And not actually meet the needs of the certificate students in robust ways. I know, and I've taught them, so I know the model on both sides of the desk.
Well, and that's because we've developed our certificates in partnership with congregations and pastors, instead of the usual model, which is the dean calls together 5 faculty members and say, what can you offer that we can make some money on? We have an intentional formed curriculum that provides our best estimate of what pastors need.
So when we began this conversation, I was saying how I have enjoyed being able to partner with DSF, and offered myself to or the Office of New Church to be able to collaborate even more deeply. And also shared with you that it's been in my portfolio and in my work to develop more distant learning opportunities. Right now, on a formal level per se, most times when people say they want to start a new church, they go to the region, and at some point the region will send them here to Indianapolis to go through a training called Leadership Academy. Leadership Academy serves a purpose, but it's certainly not holistic or preparatory enough to really fully equip any of our graduates to really do all the things that are necessary to start a church. And having started a few churches, I'm not sure that you can do, I know you can't do that in 1 week. But even still, if we were developing a 4-year program, by the time that program finished, the climate of new church will have changed enough to have to consider it obsolete. So having something like what we're talking about developing that provides the right type of fluidity and contextual flexibility is super important, because this thing is changing so rapidly all of the time. So in my mind, I'm trying to understand how what we develop, and right now this question is just rhetorical, but how what we develop either complements or could potentially threaten or compete with what we have going on at Leadership Academy. Is the potential goal in the future to create something that might make Leadership Academy obsolete, or is everyone not necessarily looking to get to a point of or to a degree of certification? What do we do with these certified people? Are we going to create any type of schisms between the certified church planters and the non-certified church planters, the way there is between commissioned and ordained people? So these are just a few preponderances that come to mind immediately that I think through this journey we will continue to discover. And I want you to chime in too. I'm sorry, go ahead, John.
I don't feel a need to compete with Leadership Academy. And as we put students through our in-person Seed Planters program, which has been more of a 2-year program, a number of those students will attend Leadership Academy, a number of them don't. A lot of our students are kind of wondering if New Church will be their direction.
Right.
And but I could also see Leadership Academy counting as one of the classes in a certificate program. Just because we're doing most of it online doesn't mean it all has to be online. And maybe we put that in as an option for people who want to do that. From my perspective, dealing with the people I am, one of the Leadership Academy, well, there are two situations. One is if you can't take a week off work or off school, it's hard to do.
Yeah.
And the other is that if the regional minister doesn't catch your vision for a new church, you won't be nominated.
Right.
And I've seen both those lead some people out. And one of my commitments is that the church cannot afford to leave good talent on the sidelines. And we've just got to find ways to bring people in. So I don't want to put Leadership Academy out of business, but I also know that a 2-year online community serves a different need than a 1-week workshop.
In some ways, Leadership Academy is putting itself out of business, not out of business, but as we're developing education, we have to ask what is the best way to provide that education. So, Leadership Academy will do its evolution, separate from whatever else we develop. But then also, for instance, in Colorado last year, there was a network within the disciples called Mission Gatherings. I know you're familiar, that offered a class called Church Planting 101. Well, when they offered that, many people from the church called confused, like, do we go to this or do we go to Leadership Academy? Like, what are the options here? So as best as we can, sometimes when you offer a lot of options, to the audience, they are perceived as competitors, even if that's not our intent. And that's the only thing I mean. Like, I know that it wouldn't be our or your intent to necessarily cause Leadership Academy to go under, but
yeah.
And
All right,
I would suggest, oh, sorry.
That's okay. Well, John and Katie, pleasure to meet you. My name is Chaplain Captain Reverend Dr. Jose Martinez. I got like a bunch of titles. I've been into the church planting business since 2002. I was originally independent Christian churches. I got my training through Stadia in the beginning, and then I switched over to the Southern Baptist because my parents are Southern Baptists, and went through the North American Mission Board Multiply program. And so when I came over to the Disciples as a church planter, I saw there was a lack of training, even having going through Leadership Academy and everything else like that, just the practices that were going on. And so with this, I shared my concern with Terrell and shared some of my experiences and the things that I see out in the church planting world. And this is where kind of like the idea of like having an online extended study course of church planting happened. Now, when it comes to like things like Leadership Academy, what I'm proposing is that have you guys ever heard of the Exponential Conference? No? Okay. Exponential is a huge church planting conference. This year's happening in Orlando, Florida, I believe. Now, Stadia, which is the original group that I started with, they use it as a launching pad for their church planters. So they have planters going through their cohort system and learning all these different core principles of church planting. But within that time of their cohort time, they have to go to Exponential, which is a church planting conference. Now, what I view the Empower curriculum doing is integrating Leadership Academy as sort of like a church planting conference, bringing everybody in, no matter where they're at in their church planting experience, to kind of come together, find different maybe ideas, but in main conjunction of connecting. And that's one of the biggest things that in the church planting world that needs to happen, is having that collegiality with one another, with other church planters and things like that. Here in Kansas City, it's a small group of people. I still have connections with my friends that are in the more evangelical conservative church planting world. Like last year I went to the annual meeting for the Southern Baptist churches, and I was there as a guest and hung out with a lot of the church planters there because a lot of them know me, but it was mainly because of that developing connections, developing different ways of how to church plant, you know, because I've planted 3 churches, 2 of them have failed, but this last one seems to be sticking. And then I'm also planting a new social entrepreneurial thing, a nonprofit. It's called Story Wagon. So I'm utilizing all the training that I received from these different core curriculums and just trying to help implement it within the disciples. Now, what I see that the disciples at a disadvantage of is that a lot of these different denominations have certificate programs in church planting specifically. I emailed Terrell different ways of different denominations are doing it. Some of it are going through seminary. So Pittsburgh Theological Seminary, they have a certificate of church planting within their Master's of Divinity. But Multiply is its own little thing with the North American Mission Board that all their church planters in the Southern Baptist churches have to go through. And so but they get a certificate. And so like whatever their region says, okay, have you gone through this? Oh yeah. Okay. You're blessed and we'll support you, blah, blah, blah. The Methodists have different ways of training. I gave Terrell like a long list of these different things. And that I think what the cool thing about this conversation is that we can kind of like start to model similar, but be different in a way, you know, because DSF has a long history. And I went to Claremont for a little bit for a summer for process theology studies. And so, you know, I kind of understand what your work has done and everything else like that. So that's where I see the benefit of all this coming together. I don't see any kind of really big competition happening, you know, because we're not trying to do just a boot camp. You know, we can do boot camp at Leadership Academy, but we're providing a long, sustainable line of education for people who are interested in church planting and want to plant a church and have that support system there throughout their whole church planting life. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you. That was really helpful. And just a thought about sort of perceived competitiveness. What I would suggest is that we would think about creating a funnel with multiple access points and entry points where people might just take a standalone course without entering into a certificate program and then really like it and want to know more. And that could happen in a bunch of different ways, you know, the sort of topical classes that are part of a certificate, but not exclusive to the certificate. And one entry point might be Leadership Academy. One entry point might be something that they do online. One entry point might be a webinar. But creating a circle of online presence where people are exposed to this, and then they can enter in different points. And that way we're always supporting the big vision, no matter where people are in that process. And there's lots of ways to do that through online platforms and webinars and you name it.
Well, the other thing I would add, Katie, is that this is like an additional help to regions, because there are some regions out there that have no experience at all about planting a church in today's context. You know, they might have read some books, they might have had some people dabble in it, but you don't like, it takes a church planter to know what church planting is about. And so like, that's the beauty of what you're doing with your certificate program already, is that you're drawing in these folks that are experienced in church planting. So, and then with the thing with the Latino and in Spanish programs, Barna did this study, and the fastest growing church plant.
I'm going to assume that the end of that is Latino churches, right?
Yeah. I would guess so. And I think we just lost him.
Yeah, he said that he's in a bad connection area. Speaking far down the future, but maybe not that far. I don't know if we have the luxury of it being that far down the future. When I look at the greatest growth of new church in 2018, it was out of the NAPAC community. You know, and so creating something like this will also be able to give us the flexibility to add additional languages better, Have we got you back, Jose? John?
To let you know some of where we're thinking ahead, we're in conversations with about starting commission ministry projects in Korean and in Chuukese.
Yes.
And they have, I'll admit, we've got a learning curve on those. Especially the Chuukese needs to be online because of the dispersion of their communities.
Yes.
And that's, we know that's a big need coming up. We're also in talks with Mission Gathering.
Before you move to Mission Gathering, let me say I'm really glad to hear that, and I'm open to continue to be one of your ambassadors in that endeavor, because I go to all the Chuukese events, and so right now I'm the only, well, me and Reverend Chung Song are really the only general ministry connections to the Chuukese community.
Okay.
And so we work with them, and so we go in and teach them things. And it's just like, in the time that we spend at their couple of general events, we can't get it all in. So I am so glad to hear how that goes. And then in the Korean community, a lot of their churches, our home churches, are very small churches. So here we are dealing with some of the same complexities.
Right. With Mission Gathering, the conversation we've been having, and we've had connections informally from kind of the start with the San Diego church. We have a number of students and graduates who are key members of that church. We have students involved with the new church starts in Pasadena and in Colorado. The discussion I've had with Rich McCullen is they know that their multiplication is going to be dependent upon getting some training for lay people as leaders, and wondering what we can do with that. So I don't know what timetable we're on with those conversations, but they're positive. And it's one of the things we've learned with our Spanish certificate program. We have lay people and clergy, at least that's how the white church would categorize them, in class together. And that gives us much better results in bringing church vitality and getting new church plants that go. So I can see in new church, we need one set of resources for new church planters. But in the long run, we're going to need another set for the early members of those new churches so they can learn kind of what they need to know. And if they're experienced church members, they're going to need to make some adjustments.
You'll see when we dive into the Empower schematic, how we're trying to set up Empower in a way to where, like, there's one, the reason it's called Empower is because there's 12 modules that all begin with the letter M. And so one of those modules is called Merger, where it deals with developing teams. And then there's another one that deals with developing people, the participants. Either one of those is built in a way to where if we need to add more substance to those modules to really make them like focus more heavily on a robust discipleship program or a robust leader development program, the system can be set up in a way to where we can integrate those things very heavily. Just like our section on money. There's so much that can be talked about relating to money. So we got to deal with how do we educate on accounting, taxes, setting up a bank account, stewardship, fundraising, being bivocational, monetizing ministry. There are, all these different aspects that are involved in each and every one of these. So there's so much to be talked about.
Good.
Yeah, and part of the systems that I've used for online education allow that flexibility. And so you can, the software that I use, I record basically in 2-minute segments. So if I need to go and delete or add something, it's really easy. Within one 15-minute video, I have that flexibility, and then adding other components and deleting other components. And it's all totally doable. And that's where I would be really excited to partner, with Empower, to be able to provide that and flexibility and not have all of your time spent on those nuts and bolts. That's what I'm for. I mean, that's part of what I'm for, to help out with some of that, and as well as guidance with pedagogy and just transforming something that's been done in person to online.
Right. Well, maybe
I've been part of a new church start as well, just as when I was a layperson 10 years ago. So I'm familiar with, my particular little context of doing that. I never attended the training. So I have a heart for that, for this ministry.
Good. That's going to give us a fresh perspective from a different aspect. Maybe this is a good time to, well, John, you tell me which direction you like to talk about. Just spend more time on how we developed the certificate program, or would you like to see more about Empower?
I'm kind of curious to see what you've already been building, and kind of then think about what a certificate program with that or alongside that could look like.
All right, I'm gonna ask Jose if you give us an overview behind an understanding of the purpose and the project, which is, you kind of started there, but just give them a little more in depth on the concept of the platform. And then Sylvia can probably do some screen sharing about, what we have been, the project as we've managed it up to this point.
Okay. Can you guys hear me? I'm on the phone now. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So basically, we've started off with identifying 12 core competencies of church planting. And as Terrell said, that they all start with the word M. So right now we're just building on what it is that we're going to be teaching for each individual core competency. And these core competencies is something that I kind of researched into, of what are the basic fundamental blocks that one person needs to plant a church. So the first thing that block of instruction that we're developing right now is called MOVE. Basically, MOVE is to focus on a person's call, in particular into church planting, and help them through looking into their discernment process, assess their potential for church planting, and try to help them think through ways of that burn out people a lot, especially within their particular core group of people. If they have a core group of people, if they don't, then we start talking about developing their core group. In that, we're looking at different texts. One of the texts that I personally is called Planting Missional Churches by Daniel M. and Ed Stetzer. Right now, we're just kind of basing everything off of if we were going to use that text as a kind of guiding resource for the church planting. So within that, they would be looking at different chapters that talk about what it takes to start a church plant, what are the different stages of church planting, what to expect in a pre-launch, what to expect to a launch, and what to expect in a post-launch. Within that, we start talking about helping them develop a church prospectus as they are thinking about their church plant, or as to help consolidate their story so that they can tell to the regions that they're wanting to plant in what the story will be. Also within that, we would incorporate digital media, so podcasts. So one in particular podcast that I found out that was very helpful, I think, to understand church planting is called A Startup. They did a 7 podcast series about church plant in like New York, and talked about the different aspects of church planting and the life of a church plant. And so within that, that would be done in a cohort setting. So we would, from Terrell's perspective, he would be training trainers to take back to their regions to start these cohorts and then provide this kind of curriculum. That's where we're at with that. So we've identified, like I said, 12 different ones. The other one's mission, motivate, mix, messaging, money, merger, manage, multiply, metrics, mature, and maximize. And so each of them will be talking about particular parts of their church planting life at that very moment. So for instance, you know, when we talk about money, that's very important. So there's another text that we're going to utilize within that called the God Ask, which is very good. And we will help them developing like, how do you do a fundraiser? How do you go out to different churches and ask for money to help support the plant? You know, that sort of thing. Should a church planter be bivocational? Those are the kind of conversations that we'll be having within these cohorts and things like that. So metrics is another thing that's very important for us to discuss. Because right now, there's not a very good metric system to measure how successful a church plant is doing. We can't no longer use, you know, bodies, pews, or bodies, buildings, and programs, you know, sort of thing. We have to figure out different ways to help these church planters measure out their metrics, because not each church plant is going to be the same. So there's a few successful church plants models that we can use, but the paradigm is shifting, and we have to be adaptive to those paradigm shifts. So that's the basic overall view of like what we're trying to implement and put into place when it comes to the construction of this curriculum. And Sylvia is the one that's been working on like the platform part. So Sylvia.
All right, so we really didn't do so much into the platform yet because we were trying to choose and decide the platform. As you know, Katie, there is really similar, right? The platforms tend to do similar things. The big issue is how much work do we want to spend in it. So what we did was we did a quick kind of introduction. What is NPower? And this is from a student point of view. We embedded a video, kind of a high level first section where I was thinking this introduction could be quote unquote free, you know, because in many classes you can see some stuff before you either sign up for the course or, you know, have to pay something for it. And then we jumped into kind of objectives. And the reason they're broken up like this is they were pretty small and simple. And I don't know, you can reuse this content in other areas. So the idea was to make it into smaller groups. So if we wanted to, let's say, grab the reflection, actually that's not a good one, grab this one, which is what is a church perspective, blah, 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 assignments, kind of creating one. This might be used as a foundation for another course on actually walking through the full perspective or updating a current one, whatever that next course might need to use this content for. So in my mind, you do content small, as Katie, you were saying, 1 to a few minutes, so that if you need to adjust it or change it, it's not a big change. And then we kind of set up that first section of read and listen, assessment, and then we provide a spiritual assessment link to it, meeting your team, and this was content that was given, books required and suggested, which is probably going to be moved up. So that is kind of the student perspective. And if you go back to kind of what it looks like, is I set up 2 quote unquote courses in Teachable. This is Teachable. Thinkific is similar. Hold on, that's my other meeting. Thinkific is similar. So I set up a church plant foundations and a church hacks because I wanted to see what it would look like side by side. And then from a admin point of view, let me see if I can go back to the admin point of view, that one. This is what it looks like in the background. So when we say move stuff, you know, you grab it, move it up. Now the books are right after the objectives. That makes it easier to change. So before we ended up building out all 12 of them, we wanted to kind of start with one, see what it feels like, get some personalization, and then say, yes, this is the platform. Let's build out the outline for the 12 other sections and start dropping in content, because then it's not me adding content, then it's, you know, Jose and Terrell and anyone else who is helping drive the content, be able to drop in sections to the specific areas. So that's kind of what it looks like. Any questions?
Is this up and running, or is this your kind of prototype, or what are you doing?
It's kind of, it's published so that Terrell can look at it, but it isn't advertised. It's really under my email address. Would we do it on a different? Yes. This is basically a, once we set it up, we're going to burn it and start with a true site so that my email addresses aren't the ones it's tied into. And I don't want to pay. That's not my, that's Terrell's pocketbook. So I just set it up as a something to show.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you.
Sylvia, if I'm hearing this correct, and I'm not sure I am, the vision would be for kind of a self-taught, where someone who's a new church planter could go into this, look at the 12 different areas. Within each area, they could find some reading, they could find some videos.
No, because they can also, at this point, and this was one of the hardest things about picking a platform, is that none of them really have a Zoom feature except for one, which they were okay, but we could set up time slots. There has to be a curriculum that's set out that says, okay, once a week or once a month, you will meet online at 3 o'clock. And you could set in that link in here. Do I have the right?
Yeah.
That's the, hold on.
Sylvia, can I add something?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so John, what we're envisioning this to be is a cohort facilitated. So like the person that's responsible for new churches in each region would have this curriculum at their disposal. They would have been taught on like what we're looking for when we're trying to impart some of these core competencies to the planter. They would lead discussions on the books. They would make sure that the planter is on track on their church planting life. If they come across issues, this will give the opportunity for the regional minister for new church to speak into those parts of their life. So like church planting is like super hard, and it requires a lot of self-sacrifice and a lot of personal finances to make a church plant run successfully. And sometimes when people are in that kind of a pickle, it messes up the relationships. It messes up their friendships, that sort of thing. And so if we're able to teach the trainers this curriculum, the trainers go back to the church planters, start teaching them this curriculum, they have a point of contact right then and there personally with those church planters. And they can help support those church planters, whether not only just spiritually, not just only, financially, but, through all the wellness dimensions, emotionally, to help them see where they need help in their church plant life. Because church planting can be isolating. Mm-hmm. So we were just wanting to make this cohort facilitated by somebody from the region that they deem is like the church planting leader, sort of thing. So, here in Kansas City, we have a minister of new church for the region. And so that's like how I'm like looking at this. And then, leading into Leadership Academy, all those folks in those different cohorts, they come to Leadership Academy, they mingle with other people that are in the same boat. They start developing a sense of community, not only with the folks that are within the region, because the region could be spread out. So like in the Colorado Rocky Mountain region, they cover like 3 or 4 states, right? But, with this program, they can still be connected with one another through online methods, and still be held accountable and still have that community that they need during their church planting process.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Sylvia. No, you go ahead.
I was going to say, so this is kind of just a sample. We just wanted to see what would it feel like, but definitely put that timeline in here. And since, of course, the paid feature has the drip portion, which means, and mandatory, don't drop it until a certain date, that's a great way to stop people from moving forward. But whether it's this, Teachable, or Thinkific, they both have that similar structure where you can stop progress until you say, yes, let's move forward, and actually break it out, as you said, Katie, into, 2 different work streams if needed.
I think one of the great things that thematically is brought out here is the tool has a couple of different, we're trying to design it to where it has a couple of different uses. So as Jose said, a middle judicatory or some type of trainer, there's a module for how to train that person to coach a church planter. Then there's a secondary aspect for if you are the church planter and how you walk through the learning of becoming a church planter. I need to also just say, for, again, future purposes, that unless I'm led to decide differently, I'm preparing, I work with a group of ecumenical colleagues that are all in different denominations at my same place, lateral place, who I'm planning to show a presentation of this in May for a meeting we have in Canada. And so during that meeting, there will be a potential invitation to, I don't know what could come out of it, but just kind of show them that this is what's being developed out of the disciples. We're building this in a way that addresses our unique context of church planting, which so happens to be very similar to those who are also my ecumenical partners. And so the potential for this to go expand outside of the disciples, but also feed the disciples, is there through that partnerships.
I think that matches well with our interests. About 20 years ago, there was an ecumenical group trying to produce some standardized curriculum for commissioned ministers, realizing that all these denominations are hitting the same issues. We may call that role by different names, but we all had to get some responsible and thorough training. So why not do that ecumenically?
Right.
And those conversations they got pretty far before they fell apart. Mm-hmm. But that was where the first drafts of the General Committee on Ministry process and the 16 competencies for ministry required for commissioned ministers, that's where that all got started. Mm-hmm. And I was actually, since I have dual ordination, I was the Presbyterian representative to that congregation, to that conversation for several years. And, I'd like to see the same kind of thing that we couldn't pull off there actually happen in new church planting. It's one of the conversations we're having for our in-person stuff in Claremont is that there's a good Episcopal presence here, but they don't have any resources to do new church planting. The national church has money to put into it, but the local church hasn't had an experience with that. And so we've been talking about ways they could join in the seed planters. We have disciples in our name, but we see disciples as more of an adjective describing how we do things than as a noun saying who you must be in order to get to the rest of the name.
That's great. That's great.
And yeah, there are a few denominationally specific things of polity in any of this work, but 95% of it is ecumenical from what I can tell.
And I think that from some of the things Sylvia's shown us that can happen through the platform, if as we grow ecumenically, there's options to be able to add those specific nuances in without it being, competing. Like if we had a Presbyterian module, we could add in the Presbyterian polity very easily. We could add in the disciples polity aspects because one of the biggest things, is language. And so when I write curricula, then I use a whole new language. So basically you have to just know Terrell's language in order to interpret what it is I'm writing, because I'm writing it in a way that's not going to be like region, presbytery, conference, none of that, so it's just ways of saying that in a brand new way.
So let me ask, and it may be helpful for me to tell you a few things about myself as well, just as we're moving forward. I've been the director of online learning for DSF for about 7 months, and we're launching right now. But I've taught online. Seminarians, and my PhD is in New Testament, so I've taught seminarians. I've also taught certificate students. And the thing, I didn't know this when I was putting together my first few online classes, but in the evals, and when students talked to me, they told me that it was the most in an online class that they had taken that they felt like they were in a classroom, in a brick and mortar classroom. So part of what I enjoy creating is community experiences where people actually do get to know each other. There's a flow of curriculum. There's a pedagogy that makes sense for the particular context that students are in. I've taught in classrooms too, so I'm familiar with both modules, and both have their gifts and their blessings and their banes. And let me ask you all, and then I might just kind of pitch some dreaming big ideas that I've been considering the past couple of weeks. What's your biggest barrier right now to offering online learning? Is it time? Is it energy? Is it converting the content? Sylvia, I imagine that this isn't the only thing that you do. I imagine that you're project managing lots of things, not only Teachable. So yeah, what are the biggest barriers to that?
So I'll start, and then I may need to drop because my other things are picking up. So Terrell and Jose have a lot of great ideas, and it's organizing that into that content that is manageable, but also usable for the end user. Okay. A little bit about me is that yes, I went to seminary. I went part-time. I went at night. It took me 6 years to finish, and I went in person. I have an MBA as well that I did online. So I've done online learning as well as in person. And you're right, creating a community is really tough. But trying to get this content organized, because some of it is new, organized in a manner that we're going to have the content ready and a manner that it's accessible for online is difficult, but also being in a candy store. There's so many choices that we have to kind of get in line and say, we got to do it this way. And yes, the choices might have ramifications in the future. But in the end, we're at the point, I think, where Terrell and Jose can say, yes, this is the platform we want to go with, or no. And then we can start saying, how do we put our content on it to make that next step, which is make it more accessible for students. I think once we get to the point where we have ironed out, yes, who's, kind of a paying model in terms of which site it's going to go. Because once you get site, you can get your custom domain, you start paying, right? It's small, but you still start paying. At that point, we get that first module on there and start soliciting feedback from people controlled people who can give us feedback on that content as a standalone and as a larger model. Not only how it flows, but also visually. Is it visually appealing? Does it visually make sense? Is it flowing nicely from module to module? Are we consistent with how we're calling things and naming things? That's really important, and that comes in the tweaking aspect. So when you say where are we at, I think we're at the point to make a decision of platform, and then we can really start cranking up content and shaping that content so that it's accessible for users.
Thank you. That helps me kind of think about how I can be the most helpful. And I'd love to hear from Terrell and Jose too.
Oh, so Katie, like my problem with it is like my lack of experience with online learning. I've taken classes that were like online, but they were always like modular. So there was pre-work that was online, but we always met together for like maybe short periods of time. And I guess that in my head, my processing, that's the way I'm thinking about this. So like there's a reason why there's 12. I mean, there's 12 months in a year. So each month, let's say a coach decides to do one module per month, so that he or she can assign the church planter the assignment pre-work. They can meet up in a meeting, like it could be an evening that they come together and like meet face to face, and then post work, and then the next month is the same thing as an example. But that would be hard. And like, let's say the Mid-America region where they have 4 areas, and maybe they have one person that's a coach within the church planting realm in Mid-America, you know, and the Mid-America region. And so how is that person going to meet face to face sort of thing? And how is that planter going to feel that community if they don't have that personal interaction? So that's where my handicap is when I'm like looking at this. So yeah.
Great, thank you. Because there's definitely ways to alleviate that with new technology. So yeah, I'll speak to that in just a moment. And that's the problem with online learning if it's not done with community in mind and building community in mind, right? We all feel like we're just in a little bubble moving forward.
And even as they say those things, it makes me think about, you know, very early we need to decide. Okay, so when we came to the table, we were already working on Empower as a tool for publicly used module for like anyone who wants to do church planting, and then this trainer module for how middle judicatory or leaders could help to train people in church planting. But now we're adding this certificate program component. So now I'm wondering about you know, if it's in the capacity of the certificate program, can it still be offered to the public? You know, how those two things compete with each other. Because if someone can just pay to actually go through Empower on their own, how do we make it different or better for the tuition that they pay for the certificate program? You know, like, is there an independence between these two? Is something we'd have to evaluate. But specifically to answer your question, as a barrier right now, specifically for me, this is a very small part of what I have to do for the whole church. And especially being that GA is coming up and there's so much that I'm working on. I'm very blessed to have Jose and Sylvia, who are both volunteering their free time to be able to do this work for the church. And so, whereas I could complain about not having time to do some of the things like vet the materials or provide content, here the two of them are working in all of this work that they've done between managing families and dual careers. So there's a lot of, so time and capacity is one of those barriers, which is an advantage in having you guys as an additional part of this team, because you add to our capacity.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all very much. That's really helpful for me. So can I kind of have permission to just dream big in a couple of different directions all at once?
Let's do it.
Okay. So I think the main thing that DSF can actually offer, and John, please jump in if you have different different ideas in this, is saving you time. I mean, we can really save you time with this in collaborating and offering online opportunities. The advantage to me is that I've taught a lot online, and I know the flow of what works for a student. So some of Sylvia's concerns, yes, you have to test your market. Yes, you have to get in there and have people say, I did not make the connection between this point and that point. Okay, well, we need to go add a connector. That's all very doable, but what I know is the conversion. I don't know your material. But I know what works in an online classroom. So I would not be trying to tweak or change the content that you offer, but figure out, like Sylvia said, how to offer that in a manageable way that's user-friendly, what chunks to break down, how long is too long. And what I found is that even imperfect is usually okay. You know, I've gone back and looked at some of my modules and thought, oh, it's a little amateurish. No one has ever complained. When I improve them, they're like, oh yeah, that's better. But they often don't know what all their options are. They only know what you're giving them, right? And I know that you're giving them really high quality. That's really obvious. So that's, you know, one of the things I think we could do is save you a lot of time by having someone like me help organize the content and then giving it to you to be proofed. Right? Or like my suggestion is that, you know, go in this order, hit these points, record these, and then we can build a slideshow together.
So let me just speak to that for one moment. One of the main things to know about Jose's vision for this is that it is multimedia. You know, he's talked about that the content comes from podcasts, from books, from articles, from white papers, from webinars, from every aspect of media, as well as our own recorded coaching additions. So yes, having a platform that does all that in an effective way is super important. But I'm also trying to gauge the degrees of closeness to this project. So like we have the 12 modules or categories. One way that we had thought about doing this is, excuse me, we have enough awareness of what the components of those modules, what the content of those modules are from a high level. And so we can provide that. So if anyone were to just like click into the beta version of this, they see, oh, here's what each of these 12 courses or options provide. But I would like to ideally maybe like not knowing how long this may take. Let's say this takes 2 hours. Do we roll this out in increments to where we are able to do a beta release on the move, and then we move to the mission? And so or do we need to have it all done to some degree of satisfaction before we release a beta? Are just some questions in my mind.
Yeah, you have the high level. I mean, you guys have been doing this. This is your work. You have the high level stuff worked out. If I was working with you, I would say roll this out in increments. Get feedback on the increments as you go, so you know what to do in the later modules, because that's going to save you time in the long run, and it's going to start making income come in right away. Mm-hmm. Which is primary. So I would say don't spend a lot of time and expense on building something until you know that modules 1 and 2 work. Yeah. And that allows you, that it's a huge expense of your time to build everything ahead of time if you already know the high level, which you do. And so what I would work with you in is, what do we want people to feel like as they go through this journey? No one has to be there. It's a certificate. No one has to be there. They're there because they want to be there. So at the end of whatever time period we determine, what do we want them to come away with? And that helps us create a journey, an educational journey that they're going on. So yeah, so I think that's a great question. I would absolutely recommend rolling out incrementally. And again, I think that's where DSF can help partner with you and again save you time. You're all busy people, you're volunteers, you know, Terrell, you've got, I'm sure, lots of different hats that you wear with Hope Partnership, and this isn't the only one. Yeah, and I totally get that. Oh, sorry.
No, I was going to say also, Katie, you know, I also want the regions to feel comfortable, like if a church planter went through this curriculum, and they got certificate out of it, that if they invested in this church planter, that the church planter will be equipped enough to have a successful church plant. You know, yes. You know, that sort of thing, and build trust within the regions for the church planters.
Yes. And we can definitely do that. And the quality of the church planters will build trust.
What I would add to that is DSF is better known in the Western U.S. And with those regions, but we're getting people across the country from regional offices reaching out to us. One of the smaller projects that we've done is offer disciples history and polity as different regions require for ordination. And we have, it's not just the Western regions that accept that. A number of other regions, committees on ministry have already gotten familiar with that. So it's accepted in Florida and in a number of the Eastern half regions already. Mm-hmm. And I think that helps us build the track record that would let people know if we're doing this certificate, it would be reliable as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. And there's lots of ways to build trust and to build authenticity. And I know, Terrell, that was one of the questions you had, you know, what gives a certificate weight? I think what gives it weight is the quality of the people who are coming out of it, and making sure that we have measures and checks and balances to ensure their success and their journey, and also their knowledgeability and capability and all of that. Jose, one of the things I heard you saying was a concern, or just your experience with online learning is like everyone does their stuff ahead of time, then comes together in a format like Zoom. And one of the things I really heard from all of you was that the personal coaching is really important, whether that's with someone's region or one of you. So one of the formats that's worked really, really well in my experience is where students, for instance, go through a module and then they have a coaching session with someone. One of you, another church planner, one of your leaders, one of your ambassadors, someone, you know, I saw a whole list on your website of people who participate. You could partner them with an experienced church planter who we might pay or might volunteer their time to have a 30-minute coaching session with them. So they're getting personal interaction. The other things that I would suggest are building a Facebook group for members of the community where they can check in anytime. Someone in the leadership checks in with that once a day, once a week, twice, whatever that is. It just looks and see what are people commenting on. Or you can use Slack. I've used Slack before. I like Slack, okay, but I have to remember to go check it, whereas most people have Facebook on their phones and they're checking them. And it can be optional or required. You know, there's a ton of ways to do that. And then maybe once a month or once a quarter, there's a Zoom meeting with all of you that's targeted. And so dreaming really big, my suggestion would be to start, like our model at DSF is we start with a webinar to capture people's interest, to get the word out there, to have repeat customers. It takes most people being exposed to an idea several times before they're engaged. Have you ever thought about church planting? You know, come on our webinar and find out what are the ins and outs. Like, what do you need to have? Are you being called to be a church planter? And I know you guys have a questionnaire, kind of self-study about that as well, which we could also convert to an online format. And then begin with a class that's actually pretty small, maybe one of the M's or even an overview class. The 12 components of church planting that last like a week. And then we take the material directly from that and implant it into the longer version. But in this way, you're capturing people's interests that you may not know are interested. We could offer that for a really low cost or even for free, and then the really interested people might sign up to be part of the certificate program. So lots of different access points. So I would say beginning with the comprehensive overview that piques people's interest and gives them value, shows them what this takes, and then expanding from that would be desirable so that we know what works and we can build this flow and this journey for people. And then create, I think some of the fear around online learning for the consumer, for the person taking the class, is that they're going to be isolated. I know what people always ask me in the individual programs that I offer, apart from DSF. Okay, well, if I sign up for this, are you going to disappear? Like, no. You have, actually, to graduate, you have to interact with me. So ensuring them that there is community and building that community along the way. And then we can scale up and down. After 2 or 3, even less than that, after a year or two, I would highly suggest having, taking components of some of the modules and creating a month-long class for people that's completely automated, that you don't have to interact with people at all. They get the drip technology, they get emails, they can join a Facebook group. But then at the end of that, they're like, oh, maybe I am ready for a certificate program. And then they can sign up for the certificate program. Right? So you have lots of different avenues for people to be exposed to your Empower amazing training, that I'm, and like John, I am also persuaded that talented people aren't receiving the training they need because of various obstacles. And part of our goal with online learning is to remove some of those obstacles.
Yeah.
So that's some of the, so let me pause because I've said a lot.
Oh man, I hope you have all that written down, because that was all very, very, very good. I'm gonna try to work backwards from what I've heard you say. Mm-hmm. The whole intensive idea works really well because of the way that we're trying to write it, to where it would take you a month to complete any one of the modules. Then having, let's say someone comes in, they say, I'm not sure I want a whole certificate, but I really need this specific course on money.
Right.
So being able to offer an entry point, this once they get in, they start doing the whole money piece. They're like, oh my gosh, I really could use the rest of this. And by the time they bought all 12, they should have just gotten the discount of doing the entire certificate. Mm-hmm. So right. I think that works really well. From what I do in the way I serve the church, this is going to serve as a really great recruitment for the certificate program, because as I'm teaching about all these subject matters all the time, all over the place, to be able to say, if you really are interested in this, you want to know more, now we have a way for you to get certification in church planting altogether, and be able to do that. You talked about these varying areas of entry. So once again, bouncing back to what Leadership Academy offers, Leadership Academy does training on 2 sides of the launch. So pre-launch and post-launch. In pre-launch, it's very much driven towards a whole week long of discernment and visioning. And then in the post-launch aspect, all of these M's are based off of a curriculum I wrote for the sustain track, that post-launch area. So a lot of this material will be taken from that curriculum that's already written. So then someone so like you talk about that week-long overview of all 12 components, that's what the sustain track currently is.
Nice.
So we can automatically just say, I love, John's idea to where it's like Leadership Academy is the online in-person addition to this certificate program, or there's other ways in which we can flip that around to understand the way in which these two work together. And then you might have also seen on our website that we have a complete coaching program. So each one of our church planters gets 2 years of coaching. And so I think making sure that the coaches are aware that any one of these people are taking this certificate program and are using an awareness of what part they are in the module can even better influence or inform their coaching sessions on a monthly basis. Now, we may consider that the coaching that we're providing is very separate than what we're doing here. And that way we integrate maybe more of the DSF mentors. And I think that like these 9 mentors you have can even, we can even find a way to shoot them as content providers, and then integrate them as coaches in like maybe any one of these areas of expertise.
Terrell, a question. As we're thinking about putting together a curriculum, one of the options that's worked on some other topics is we kind of have a list of required classes and then a list of electives. And I'd see, all 12 of these being eventually required, but then we can have some electives. One of them might be a denominational polity class that applies to your setting. And I wonder about the idea of having some of these in-person events as electives. Leadership Academy, coaching, things like the Stadia and Exponential.
Right.
Maybe we're expecting people to go and do some of those in person, but we give them a range of choices. So if you can't take the week off work, you can still do something. So people have to get so many credits out of their electives. That also gives us a structure where if somebody is attending a really great conference that none of us have heard of, we could give that one credit,
right,
without telling every student that they should go through it or must go through it.
Yeah, that's really good. And Jose goes to a gob of church planting conferences. I do also, and because I realize that now there's a lot of people who can't attend Leadership Academy because it's one time in a very specific time of the year, then I have opened it up to be like, I'll give you a list of vetted conferences that you can go to that I say works just as well. But this electives idea is a really, really good one, because even I aspire that one day we will have a residency program attached to some of this. And so how they get their on the ground or their field work experience relating to this program is an important part of that as well.
Exactly. I think the coordinator of your coaching is Joy Robinson.
Yeah.
Who is one of our students.
Right. Yeah.
So, and related to one of our staff members. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Anything that gives us a chance to interface more with Joy is a good thing.
Right.
Well, John, there's one more thing, like as for dreaming big here, like what I hope, like each church planter that goes through this program, it helps them in whether their commission track or ordination track. Like a region can look at this and say, oh, okay, this will help you be a commissioned minister within our region. That's another ultimate goal that I hope this program will help with the church planters, and that they don't have to jump through another hoop to get their commissioning or to get their ordination or whatever.
Part of my big dream, and this, well, in my mind, is more like 5 years away, but Katie makes things happen faster than I think possible, so who knows. But is to get to the point where we have an online certificate program in multiple languages that regions will recognize as meeting the 16 competencies for ministry, and either the alternative track for ordination or the commission ministry track in the different regions. Once we would have that up and running, we can coordinate that with New Church, eliminate some overlap, but let people basically do 2 certificates for the work of 1.5 or 1 3/4, and give them 2 credentials, one for New Church and one for commissioning or ordination. I think one of the big effects of our San Diego and growing Spanish certificate program is it was intentionally designed to lead toward commission ministry. It was designed so it met all of those requirements from General Committee on Ministry documents. And so it gets recognition. And we've had, let's see, we're about 100 graduates into that program. We have had 30 to 40 of them become commissioned. Well, including a few who went alternative track to ordination. And so we've got a track record there. And it's a deep commitment that, I'm seminary trained, I'm a PhD, I'm a seminary professor, but we have to get other ways to get people into recognized ministry.
Amen.
Out of our certificate graduates, about a quarter of them go on for the MDiv, and that's great. But that's not my first goal. My first goal is to get people into recognized ministry so they can operate with the support of the wider church instead of operating outside the system.
Yeah, and it's I think Terrell, I think it was you that commented on the kind of differences, the perceived differences or status differences between commissioned and ordained. And I will say, and John, I never thought about it, but I think it might be partly due to DSF's efforts and kind of around here. When I was a commissioned minister, I didn't experience any of that. Now, I was also working on my PhD at the time. My route to ordained ministry was unusual, but I don't even know who's commissioned or ordained in my region. I have no idea. It's sort of less palpable here. So I think this could also contribute again to bridging that divide within the denomination.
So
it's one of the things I've been proud of is that our commission ministers who are certificate graduates, when they sit down and talk with seminary graduates, they realize they read the same books. One of them read it in English, one of them read it in Spanish, but it's the same book. And there's just enough of that it diminishes a lot of that. Some of the hierarchy is because people want to be hierarchical, especially the people who think they're on top. But some of the hierarchy is just out of unfamiliarity of we don't know what you did in your program. When they find out the similarities, it gets somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And unfortunately, the thing is with this whole difference is the way in which our structure is within the disciples is that the power is held in the regional minister. So most of that education is going to be just convincing the regions or the powers within the regions to understand how this is meant to like ease their angst rather than create more barriers to entry.
And we are, DSF is working with 11 different committees on ministry in 11 different regions.
Great.
And they all have their own rules, but we're, step by step figuring out how to work with them and show them that what we're producing are good pastors and well-trained pastors, and we can do it in a number of different ways.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that gives us an entry point. We have students doing the Committee on Ministry process in Southwest, in Illinois, Wisconsin, in Tennessee, in Virginia. So I think we have a bit of a toehold, and with this program, we would have a lot more to offer to those regions.
One of the things I'd like for you to write down on your list, Katie, is we we've gotten into some conversation also about, I think one area of ignorance for us is the property. So like the content and how we position the content in a way that's legal, basically.
Oh, okay.
So I'm not saying we need that education at this moment, but eventually this something we need help with.
In one of my previous careers, I was editor for some different publishing companies. So I had a 17-year crash course in copyright law and contract writing and how to make sure that everything's legal. So that's something we can add in.
Great.
Yeah, and I'm hearing the desire for spiritual formation to be an important component of whatever is offered.
Yes, Jose is very big on that. That this is not just about the practical, but also the theological. Not to compete with whatever theological development they're getting at their seminary, but just having a wider idea of it, because our main competitors won't be within. There'll be other denominations who are doing very similar things. But what we find is when we vet those resources, they are often very I don't want to go so far as to call them misogynistic, but they have a very strong bent towards hetero white norms. And so that's not the disciples' full context. And that's not even the whole kingdom's full context. So we need to be able to write things that is going to be more palatable to the entire kingdom at large.
Beautiful.
And our combined student body between degrees and certificates has just dropped under 40% Anglo. We were the first of the disciples seminaries to partner with GLAD, now Alliance Q. We've had gay and lesbian students and graduates and getting ordained for decades.
Right.
So that's really where we are. And as I said, we were admitting women from the start. So if you look at our staff, our students, or our board, you see about the same representation. And we've intentionally tried to structure that in. It's not an add-on to the way we've done things.
Right.
So unfortunately, you got two of the white members of our staff here, but
that's the core value. And I have dreams of creating spiritual practices, sort of multicultural competent spiritual practice short courses for people that anyone can engage in. So I can imagine that once we get those up and running, and I think Belva is like the best spiritual practice leader ever. I can imagine her offering, even just a 15 or 20 minute practice that we record and offer to people, and those might be available in some variety to people in the certificate program as part of their spiritual formation, in addition to that which you offer.
And Belva's seminary courses on spiritual formation and spiritual practices are now taught online.
Oh, nice.
So she has been figuring out how to do that online, which it boggles my mind. So we've got some expertise there.
When we talk about the whole copywriting of material, or just legally using material, we do still need to go back to the idea of how this that we do together, the relationship with what we would be able to potentially offer to the public. So does this relationship of the certificate program lock Empower into use there to where we could not offer it in the public, or I don't think that would be what your intent would be. So we just need to work through how we offer a public platform.
What I'd suggest, and this is kind of the direction we're moving in with different pieces. First of all, any of the projects where we're providing content will have a free component. There are starter classes and other things that are offered free. Mm-hmm. We think for some of the longer term programs, we will need to charge. What we've been able to do with our in-person certificates is convince regions of the value so that they're willing to pick up a share of the cost. That's very relational and contingent on others agreeing with this, but that's what we've been doing. And it seems to me that we could work then with the revenue sharing model. The energies we're both partners would be putting into the project are more time than money. And if we are charging tuition for certificate completion, we can, DSF may be the one better set up to collect the revenues, but then we split it. I don't know what your budget is like. I know some of our partners and things like that will then use their revenues to offer some scholarships or make sure that certain people can attend for free or other things. That's just kind of a starting point.
Yeah, and if for any reason, Empower, 10 years down the road wanted to separate from DSF, I think we could have a mechanism in place for how to do that cleanly, but also wouldn't anticipate that. I would want this to be win-win for everyone.
Right.
Saving time.
Well, I guess it reminds me of, like, okay, so when you write a textbook, if we think about Empower as a textbook, if I were to write a book and then the book is being used within the class, I could still sell the book on Amazon. And then it also will be used within the class and the students will have to buy the book. The challenging thing is that Empower, the way that we're structuring it, is the class. So it's not just a resource to the class, it is the class. So if it is the certificate program, then I still am looking to hear how we offer something separate to the public that doesn't directly compete with the certificate program, because otherwise anyone who's getting it in the public might as well as use the certificate program unless we create some type of cost difference.
My suggestion, and just we might come up with better suggestions in the future, would be to funnel the public offering into the certificate. So someone finishes the public offering, you're like, hey, would you like to go further and deeper? Consider this. So it's a lead in, and they don't have to repeat material they've already had. But like everything, if the certificate is the most comprehensive, valuable, spiritual, formative thing that aids the church the most, and that's an if, and I sense that's where you're all going, then everything we do funnels towards the certificate, but doesn't demand that people complete it. Does that resonate?
Kind of. So there are different church networks, church planting networks. Like they put all their material in like one booklet type deal. So for instance, the Church Multiplication Network, you can buy their whole curriculum online. And I guess I think this is where Terrell is going. Like if we happen, because there's no resource out there that caters to LGBT or people of color church planters. And so what we're doing is we're developing this new resource. Like we're developing a curriculum where that's inclusive. So if we are able to put it down, put it all in print, and then we put it all together, you know, and we're doing the certificate program with VSF, would there be any kind of conflict in that in case we want to like have them, if they could purchase it online, you know, and not require them to go through the certificate program? You hear what I'm saying? I think that's the question Terrell's asking. Did I interpret that right, Terrell?
Yes, that's kind of like, so the way I just try to visualize that is that there will be a part of the public offering that has components. Like let's say if we were doing one part of the module and had 3 lessons, and then they could see that there were 8 more lessons, but those lessons would be locked, and there'd be some teaser saying you can get access to this lesson, to these additional components by going through, you know, with the certificate program. I don't know if that's too much of a tease or whatever, but so that would be the differentiation. John?
I think that's a good approach. I think it matches some of the things we're talking about with the rest of our online learning, where, and some that we've done with the in-person certificates. The in-person certificates require 8 classes that are pretty intense multi-day things, but it also requires that the student take 8 Saturday one-day things. And we've allowed anybody to come to the Saturday events. If you're enrolled in the certificate, you can attend as many of the Saturdays as you want for free if you're paying for the certificate. If you aren't, you could attend, I think, 2 of them for free. And if you want to keep attending more of those, we charge like $25 a piece because there's some food in the middle of the day. And so we have people who've taken a lot of those and then sign up for the certificate to do the required classes. And it's been a funnel in. But I think most every model we're talking about allows something free as a funnel. So the idea of your, you know, the first module or first lesson in each module, however we define that, is publicly available for free. But if you want to unlock the rest, you need to enroll as a student. I don't know if you would consider taking all of the Empower text pieces and putting them all together as a book or PDF that New Church would sell. I would think that would be workable and wouldn't be competition with the certificate because the certificate has a lot more interaction. I guess you could put Empower behind, or parts of it behind a paywall. And so people who want to get access to all of that can, but then a lot of the interactive class parts are on our website to be used in conjunction, and there's an additional charge for that. So I would see a number of ways we could structure it, give people multiple access points with a number of those access entry points being free, and have some different levels of content access. with the certificate being the most involved and I would presume the most expensive. But
and that would, as far as working out the costs and the differences and all that, that would be something like, at what point in our progress do we start working on all that? Because we haven't thought about that at all.
Yeah,
I think John and I need to talk about the potentiality, but I think we could get, I mean, in my mind, we could probably do that next week.
yeah, I think we could work on a proposal and kind of a very initial sketch of what those could look like. And from our end, one of the big variables on pricing is kind of how much content are we trying to get, and how much of it is really interactive. Obviously, doing a live Zoom, we've got to pay some people to do that, and that cost goes up. If it's something that we post on a website and let people read on their own, we don't need to charge nearly as much for that.
So what I'm finding some other networks that are doing when it comes to that, they're pre-recording like a 5-minute segment of their special speaker. So like the Planting Missional Churches book that I talked about with Daniel M. and Ed Stetzer, they have a website along with that where you can pay to go in and see these different lessons from different respected church planters within the evangelical world. And that's part of their course curriculum, is these pre-recorded videos. And that's what I kind of envision with Empower, is that we pre-record some of our special speakers that we want to kind of highlight, that are in the disciples or in a progressive church plant, and have them speak about that particular subject, like in their area of expertise.
So with that idea, one of the things that would be a cost factor is continuity and recording. So
that's where DSF would be helpful.
Yeah.
With that. So we could manage some of those. I mean, me right now, I could manage some of those details for you.
All right, good.
Right. And yeah, and I have particular software that I use, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I would say, one thing to think about is, like, I would say one of the three of you or another person within your structure will need to be the continuity voice throughout all modules. So they do the brief introduction. Hey, this is Sylvia. Hey, this is whoever it is, to provide some of that continuity, because otherwise it will feel very patchwork. And then that person says, hey, we have this great guest. Look who it is. My voice will be, I envision that my voice would be in there some as a common thread for people engaging in all of DSF learning, but just at the very beginning, at the very end. And that way, when people have technical questions, they know who to email, and that's me, not you guys.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not having to manage all of that.
And it's important that we also keep in mind the work of Sylvia as a project manager. So whereas, you, Katie, are able to handle so many more of these technical aspects where she's not having to do the technical, her ability to keep this all going has been very valuable. And so she can continue to help us to do that. And so she's committed to just volunteer to do that for about 2 to 3 hours a week.
I sense that she might be a twin soul of mine with her love of project management. So that would be fun.
She's really good. She follows up with us and keeps us in order. So there's recorded content. Then also, just to let you know of other progress we've made, we've already begun the filing of registration for Empower as a name under church planting, equipping, platform, or software. So that and that ownership is through Disciples Church Extension Fund. So all of that will happen is separate to so that part of it we won't have to do, but just to let you know that that's already a part of the IP that's owned, and we've also purchased a few domain names.
Okay.
Great.
And so from a legal aspect, how do you normally work, John? Do you normally draw up like some type of partnership contracts, or is this all a shake of a hand? How do those legalities work?
We haven't moved yet to a partnership with this kind of formality. What we're doing, say with Week of Compassion at the moment, is one free webinar that one of their staff provides the video and Katie puts online. We hope that'll grow into a much more extensive partnership. But I would think we need some sort of agreement that makes it clear ownership of the IP, whatever, who's responsible for what kinds of costs and what kind of revenue sharing we're doing.
And you said you're fully trained to walk with us on that.
Yes, I can write a contract.
Okay, and we do have lawyers retained or whatever, but they're going. I'm trying to be a good steward of all of this without it being
right.
Turn into something too rigid.
And I would say what we need is something that's about a 2-page memorandum of understanding. We don't need a 20-page contract and notary publics and legal review and all of that.
Gotcha.
And we can do that if you or others in Hope feel that's appropriate, but
okay.
So yeah, we're not really neither of us have to put up a lot of money up front, and so there's not that kind of legal consideration. We're agreeing to work together. We're agreeing on a way to divide the labor.
Mm-hmm.
And some patterns of communication and those sorts of things.
Right.
And that if there's money that comes in, we split it.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, if I needed to put in $50,000 and have you match that to create a separate organization, we'd want the lawyers looking over all that.
I got you. Yeah. Okay. So then also, we will begin working on the branding aspect of it. But Katie, I would like for somehow you and Sylvia to have an additional conversation about platform, because you've already been using, what's it called?
We haven't made a final decision yet, and pretty flexible. So I was, John is going to receive an email from me on Monday about that, about what platforms to use. But no, I'm happy to talk to Sylvia about that. There's a ton of good ones out there. Like she said, they all pretty much do the same thing. So it's really looking at trials and cost. The one thing to consider is just 2 quick things, I think, for all of you. I'm in the middle of brainstorming with our team at DSF what the name of our online course offerings is going to be. It might be DSF, but it might be something else as well. So we're deciding that, and that will decide our domain name. So we're working on all that. I expect to have it done. I expect, again, to send John an email next week about the choices that we've narrowed down. And then once, for instance, on Thinkific, once you choose a platform name, whether it's ours or yours, and that if it's ours, that decreases cost. If it's yours, it increases cost, because that means we would have 2 that I was working on. It's unchangeable. Like, Thinkific is unchangeable. So those are permanent. So we have to be really, really sure. So it's good to be generic with those. And they usually end up being courses.brandname.com. But mostly people will enter those through a link that you give them, so it doesn't even really matter that much
Right.
what the branding name is for the URL.
And that's why when she presented it before, it was called Pathways, because that was the first name we were using.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll see Emerge, that was another name. So we've been using this evolution of names, but we've landed on Empower and started the legal capture of that name.
Mm-hmm.
So if it looked like that Sylvia was comfortable with Teachable.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you guys decide that you want to continue to use Teachable, then that's just fine. Or think whichever one is fine with me, but we will need to like develop a timeline next too.
Yeah.
And I guess we would have to decide upon what we are moving back from. Do we want to talk about some type of presentation at GA? I don't know what your presence will be at GA, but we'll have a significant presence at GA. So will we be prepared for some beta outroll for GA? I will need to have some type of something to demonstrate for my May Ecumenical Partners meeting. John, you're welcome to join me at that meeting. And because you can come under my membership, so you would just have to get to Montreal. But you're welcome to join me there, or Katie, or both of you. It doesn't matter to me.
I'll be in Montreal in April. I wish it coincided, but
Oh, okay, yeah. So the timeline is also one thing I would like to talk about too.
Great. And
what was your John response when I mentioned GA?
Oh, we will have a large booth in the seminaries area. And we're also getting a single booth outside that to talk about our online learning, which is, we have a lot of elements that are more lay oriented, and we thought lay people are not going to go looking on Seminary Row expecting to find things for them. So we'll be in two different parts, and whatever we have, we can roll out at both of those.
And I'll have one of those nifty in my booth, one of the nifty scanners. So people that are interested, I can just scan their name tag and their data gets automatically added. And so really what I envision is having sign-up opportunities like, for the free stuff, are you interested in this, that we should be, there's no reason why we can't have a 1-week module up and running by GA. I mean, I think we could have that up and running in 2 weeks. Honestly, I mean, right? Like, I mean, really, because this is material you already know, and a lot of it's already written. So if you give that to me, I produce an outline, give it back to you, like that kind of back and forth. But we can have some kind of offering up and running by GA that people might go home and watch in the evening at their hotel and then come back to the booth, right? So yeah, definitely by GA, we'll have timelines ready and some offerings available.
Well, you saw on the test module that, well, first of all, let me say this, that I'm a really big proponent of focus groups and beta testing. So whatever we do, I would want to vet that through some type of focus group or, beta testers before we do any type of public release. I'm perfectly okay with us expressing that we've had this meeting and that we have agreed to walk forward in partnership. Like on social or, to whatever degree you deem necessary. Like for instance, I have a major board meeting coming up in a couple of weeks, and I would love to be able to share with them, how awesome this is. I think they're going to be thrilled. But then when you talk about releasing these components, the marketing is probably, the branding, let me say, is something that I want to jump in first to really start trying to put that on our marketing department's mind to start integrating, because the logo that you saw in the beta test was just something I threw together. Now we need an actual real logo, And then a part of branding is the continuity of voice. So having those introduction videos where I'd have to record those is going to be important. So I don't know if that means it'd be easier for me to jump out there to California to record those. And if so, can we develop enough scripts to where I can do a considerable amount of recording up front to think about the future of the project? Just random thoughts in my mind.
I think we can just record them on Zoom.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah, I mean, this works well. It's effective. It's a time saver. John, if you were about to say that we're about to buy a ton of professional camera equipment and sound equipment, then yeah, come on out to Claremont. But like this works very well. And what I'll do is get a microphone and send it to you so that we have the same microphone.
Yeah, for consistency, quality.
For a little consistency, but my experience is not to get too attached to that, because the humidity, the time of day, how much coffee, how much water you've had means it will always sound a little different.
Okay.
And basically in a course, as long as it's clear and high quality, the little differences no one cares about. I've recorded things with the flu and just said at the beginning, I have the flu. I'm sorry, I'm a little froggy. No, yeah. Everyone says, I love the content. No one says, how could you record with a froggy voice?
Right, right.
That's what's important.
And we're just talking about the beta test for the videos, right? Because what I hope is that, to me, aesthetics is very important when it comes to new church planters, especially in the millennial generation. Aesthetics is so important. And so like one of the things that I found from other church planting networks and in their curriculums when they do videos, it's highly stylized and high quality. So I would hope we would talk about that in the future, about that being consistent, that consistent high quality. So like, for instance, back in the day when Rob Bell did the Nuba series, it was highly popular, not just because of the content, but like the amount of artistic value that they had in each video. You hear what I'm saying? So it was aesthetically pleasing for folks to look at those kind of like mini lessons from Rob Bell.
Yes, and we'll there's different strategies for doing that. Sometimes simple and pleasing is better than trying to do things that are too complicated, but people lose interest.
Right.
So we can start with small, with simple and elegant, or whatever adjective we want to use for that.
Yeah, I completely agree. Simple, but beautiful.
Yeah, simple but beautiful works.
Can we revisit the timeline conversation?
Sure.
So the other kind of slowing thing, as I said before, is that with my hats, not that anyone else is less busy, but I'm just gone so much. Like I leave tomorrow, I'm gone 3 days next week. I'm gone a lot. So I will definitely, just like I rely very much on Jose and Sylvia to kind of like keep me in order and keep me going on this. Like if I'm not delivering something, and Katie, I'll shoot you my cell phone as well too. But like, text is like the quickest way to grab me and say, hey, I'm waiting on this. You're slowing things down. Let's get this in order. If we work on a timeline backing up from GA, I know that one of the first things I'm going to do when I walk outside this door is is talk to the marketing department about beginning the logo development. And so for Empower specifically, just like I heard you say that you are working on the branding for your certificate program in general. So Empower be integrated into the certificate, but it's also kind of separate.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so I'll begin that branding work, and I have a hard time thinking like this, but we will have to think about like, so then what are we? Is there a specific deliverable that will happen at GA other than us talking about it. So does that mean, are we going to have like monitors with demonstrations on them?
So yeah, it's a great question. My suggestion would be that by GA, we have a webinar that we've developed that one of you coordinates with me and we deliver. And we offer that for free. We advertise it. I have 3 coming up in the next week and a half. And I'd like to have 2 or 3 a month for DSF. Mm-hmm. That serves as a mini beta tester for who's interested. And we get their live Q&A, we get live feedback, we get to download it, put it on YouTube, do whatever we want with it. It can also serve as an intro to the program eventually, or some version of it. So I'd say, we could probably pull together a webinar whenever you want. I mean, just depending on your schedule. They don't take that long to develop, a couple of weeks. I think it would be advantageous if we had a mini course ready to go by GA that's basic. I haven't looked at all, I haven't seen all the Empower material, obviously, so I'm just speaking in little hypotheticals. A 5-day course that's an intro to church planting. Doesn't get into the nitty-gritties. It inspires people and gives them some content. Or you're thinking about starting a church, here's some things to think about. How are you called to be a church planter, or the discernment? I mean, we can pick any one little nuanced portion of that and create like a 5-session course around that. And no session is longer than like 10 or 15 minutes, just to give people a taste and to be inspired. And again, this is all content that you already have that I would help you put into bite-sized features that are accessible to people, that we can have ready to go by GA, so people can get a little taste of it. And then at the end of that, we say, are you looking for more? Sign up. You might want to pre-sign up now, pre-register for this thing coming up. And by GA, we would have a timeline, a better timeline for what's coming in the future. But if we can have those 2 offerings ready by GA, I think that would be very successful. So John, what I was saying is by GA, if we could have a webinar that we've already done, and then a really short teaser course, like 5 lessons long, 15 minutes each, 10 minutes each, that gives people an overview of what they could expect.
With the webinar, I know we could do it on the New Church Hacks platform. The New Church Hacks schedule, I mean, this type of thing is not congruent with the New Church Hacks theme. But as far as like our use of whatever we use, WebGem, we could use that, and we could also use all the email addresses that we've collected from the Hacks audience. So we could be able to get one of those in pretty easily, and I assume that you guys could do the same on your with your audience.
Yeah, we have Webinar. We use Webinar Ninja right now, although I've used Webinar Jam in the past. I've used Webinar Jam since then, and I like it a lot better. So I might be suggesting a switch, but either one of those would work. Yes, and we can email all of our audiences. They're not going to know if it's Webinar Ninja or Webinar Jam. They're just going to know they click on a link. Right.
And then as far as the mini course, is that an online course, or is this something that we're offering in person somewhere? Is this something that we could just like do with the seed planters real quick? Is there space in the seed planters schedule to do something like that? Like what is the actuality of the quick course?
My thought was that it would be, and I'm certainly open, it would be a feeder into module 1 of the certificate program. So we're going to we would choose a specific topic to explore and decide who the audience is and develop it, so I can imagine, I'm just kind of speaking out loud here. Suppose the webinar is 5 things you always wanted to know but never knew to ask about church planting. Mm-hmm. And then the course elaborates on those 5 things. And then at the end of that, does this all resonate? Is this making sense? You might want to sign up for Empower Move. Mm-hmm. And so that'll have to be developed. One of the things I would sort of work with probably, I guess, Sylvia or maybe Jose on is developing an avatar. Who is your ideal person that comes through this? What do they read? Where do they go to church? What are their beliefs? What are they excited about? So that we know how to talk to them. And I hear that you do a lot of that with your logo development and branding already. So kind of giving me some insight into who's showing up and why.
Yeah.
Will help us think about those content of that course.
I don't know if Terrell wants to hear my ideal person, but it's to me, it's a non-disciple person who's disenchanted with the church, but wants to continue on with their Christian faith and just trying to find something new to help them reinvent the paradigm of church. That's what I'm looking for.
I think that does not scare me at all. I think that someone who is the term that just came to my mind that I've never heard before is someone who is de-denomination. So not someone who has chosen not to affiliate or is not currently affiliated, but has left their affiliation for some reason. And that is a large area of growth for the disciples in people who are transferring from other denominations or somehow have chosen that they did not want to be affiliated, but then all of a sudden felt comfort within the disciples' context. So everything that you're saying, Jose, I think that having that type of ideal participant will give us the right type of open ideal person that could actually serve as the right type of voice for someone. So that type of person could speak well of even a disciples person. Whereas in reverse, I'm wondering if someone who is more ideal, who's someone who would be a fourth generation disciple, the credit disciples would say this is the ideal disciples person. If that type of person itself would rub against our target audience, and we know that there's a spectrum of people who are core disciples.
Yeah, so who's showing up now for your trainings?
See, that's really hard because in the New Church Hacks, although it is New Church Hacks as a title even is meant to be a double entendre in the sense that you have New Church Hacks or is New Church Hacks. So people can either decide I'm a new church, so I need these tools, or I want my church to become new, so I need these tools. So that's why our motto is building the church from start to restart. But this is very specific at First Life. Matter of fact, it is so much. What we're going to find as two audiences within this whole project are people who are trying to either discern church planting or people who have already kind of started this journey and are feeling ill-equipped. So they may feel like, oh crap, I've already done all the move component. I've already done all the mission module. I've done all of that. So walking through those modules will just be like, have you thoroughly thought about every aspect of that development? And they'll be bored maybe with the first couple of modules before they get into it. And then someone, if they've already been doing church planting for 3 to 5 years, may be like, or who is super early, that by the time they get to the maturing aspect, it's like, wait, I'm already talking about multiplying and I haven't even started gathering people, so it's a weird paradox of audience. I probably said a lot, but I want you to get a full understanding of
that actually really helps because it changes. What it does for me is really affects the ad copy that we choose when we're making social media announcements, and just thinking about language. And so, so that helps me. And eventually, I would say we would need to come up, we need to give this person a name. You need to tell me where they live, what kind of car they drive, if they drive a car. if they have a family, if they, you know, like what's their church background, that kind of stuff. Like that just helps flesh out who this is. And speaking to this one person ends up drawing other people in, even if they don't fit the avatar, because we have a voice.
Somehow, the hardest thing about building an audience or this type of work, and just to let you know, my secular degree is in marketing and communications. Mm-hmm. Building this type of work is, how do we choose an audience that gives the right type of ambiguity? So like, will we be missing the mark if we make this person queer? Will we be missing the mark if we make this person Black? So how can we draw the right type of ambiguities that open it up and then help people see themselves as an end user? Like, so if this is a millennial, does that mean that you know, baby boomers who are trying to start churches won't feel comfortable? And that's not what we want to do.
No, and I have a feeling once they're in the program, they'll be happy.
Right.
It's drawing people to the program in language that works for them, and makes promises that we can keep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Katie, so from my understanding, what you're wanting is like sort of like a trends thing description of the person that we're looking at. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah. Who do you want to show up?
Okay. Mm-hmm. So I work with my wife is a Hallmark employee. She works at the main office of Hallmark, and I have access to cultural trends, their
nice.
reports, things like that. So the person that I think of is their market person. You know, they were not the moms or anything else like that, but they're looking at the younger generation, and that's what I'm looking towards. And I can send a description of this type of person to you and to Terrell about who it is in my mind that I envision taking this kind of course. Is that what you're asking for?
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be super formal. It just helps give me an idea so that I'm shaping a feel. You know your content. Like I said, I'm not trying to alter your content at all. But yeah, it helps give me a feel, like for aesthetics. Okay. And if we're running a Facebook ad, that kind of thing, just, you know, I obviously wouldn't do any of that without consulting you guys. It just gives me an idea so we're not wasting time.
Yeah, I can send something to you and Terrell, and then it can axe it or modify it or whatever. So.
Cool.
John, what are you thinking?
All of this sounds good to me. I like the idea that we keep in our minds the people who don't identify as disciples, but who are looking for a resource about how to have a good contemporary church.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people will think of that in terms of a church that's life-giving for people like me,
mm-hmm.
Which may not be people who look like me, you know.
Yeah, I like that line.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll tell you guys, I've recorded this meeting, especially since Sylvia had to drop out. I'm going to drop this into a private YouTube and send this back to you to reference, because we've talked about so much, you know, so that you can go back to it to look at. When should we think about regathering?
But I was out for a couple minutes there. Was there things I missed about timeline?
I think we recapped it.
Yeah, she did.
Okay.
Also, my meeting in Canada is, well, let me say my board meeting is the 10th the 11th and the 12th of March.
Okay.
Then just for calendar's sake, Leadership Academy this year is October 7th through the 11th. And we know when GA is, but the Canada meeting is May 6th through the 8th in Montreal.
And that's the ecumenical meeting?
Yes. How appealing is it to you, John, to come to that meeting with me?
Well, it's pretty interesting.
I mean, I know that your whole world isn't this project or whatever.
I think it'd be really hard for me to get out of town. That's a few days after our board meeting and a week before graduation, and
okay.
So I think I'd say no at this point, but just because of schedule, not because of lack of interest.
Right, gotcha.
I have a board meeting coming up in May. I'm wondering if it makes sense for either Katie or me to make a video that you can show to your board, and then have the reverse happen to show to my board. Just kind of announcing that we're working on this together in partnership and we're excited and look for actual details by GA.
Sounds good.
But my point is, I'm happy to do whatever will help you with your board.
And for timeline, I wonder if it makes sense, just in the interest of being thorough and making sure we're all on the same page, but also, again, we want to be time savers for you guys. For me, maybe to be in touch with Sylvia a little bit and to put some thoughts on paper about potential timelines, just to send out, and then we can, you can say yes or no, and then we can regather in 2 or 3 weeks.
Yep, she's the timeline queen, so that makes a lot of sense. So I will process this video and have that sent to her, so that if she wants to try to look at it, then we can. We can also work to update a little more of the content, the high level content in the Teachable platform. Is it your suggestion, Katie, that we just continue to work in that right now? Or is it time to actually start flipping the switch on a home?
Let me consider that. If you're comfortable, and you can send me any content that you have, and I'm doing this with a couple of other potential partner organizations as well, so I can look at the content to make sure I have a really good understanding of it. And then I would say putting time and effort into the webinar and into a short course, to me, is more advantageous. Once you feel like you're high level, that you understand your high level. I mean, it sounds like you do. I'm not sure you need much more work on that. It sounds like you've got it. I mean, you have 12 M's that Jose spoke eloquently about. It sounds like the high level stuff is done to me, but there may be internal things that you guys are still working on, which I understand. So my first impulse is to say concentrate, if this is the model that we're all agreeing to, which we may not. My impulse would be to spend time on the webinar and on a short course that can be further developed. And once there's a momentum and some beta testers, then we can put some time and energy into a more robust course.
I'm cool with that.
And then the webinar becomes a really helpful advertising platform. And if you can send me, again, if you feel comfortable sending me your material, I promise I won't pass it off as my own or sign my name to it or anything.
You're going to go start a church, aren't you?
Yeah.
That would actually be really great.
Yeah. what I can do is make a suggestion and even make a little sketch about, like, we could create a PDF, a high quality PDF that has some value to it that can help generate some more email addresses outside of those which our mutual groups already have.
Okay. I will put
a lead magnet, basically.
Okay. When I send out this email with the video, you'll have Sylvia's information. You can connect with her. You're perfectly okay to have all of our materials. I don't have any problem with that. And Sylvia can give you access to the platform. Just tell her that, I've said that that's okay. Or I'll drop that in the email as well. Then also whatever you want to set up with Jose to develop more of the bones of the content, I'm perfectly okay with that.
Great.
And what I usually end up coming back to do is vetting the content and adding a continuity of voice. So I make sure that all the language is the same from the way I'm doing language. For instance, right now there's a piece of our module that uses the word spouse, and I don't use the word spouse. I say most significant partner. So because I don't want to make marriage seem like the goal or the most important thing, or you can't plant a church unless you're married. So, those are the type of little small bents that our class will have as an advantage over, and people will be able to see that very well. And I'm not going to pretend to say that I am as an expert on gray language. So I'm leaning on all of us to be able to bring our allergies to the table to say, we might think about saying this a little more differently.
Yeah, I love that.
And we can do some of that beta testing with our own staff, because we've got staff with different experience. Some who come at things as laity, some as experienced pastors, some as recent graduates. And it always amazes me what each of them hears.
Yeah, and I'm teaching history and polity to our students in Northern California right now. So if we have something up and running, by the time we get to polity, I can have them vet it. Like, where do you see disciples polity in this material?
Oh, nice.
I'm happy to use them as testers if it fits in the scope of what we're doing. Yeah.
Well, you are at college, so you have to do your hazing where you can.
Yeah.
Well, Jose,
in terms of timeline, does that give you everything you need in time for your board meeting?
I just today asked for time to even speak at the board meeting. So let me.
Oh, right. Yeah, it's Hope board, or
Hope and DCEF have their board meetings at the same time.
Okay, so it's not just you and New Church, Disciples Church Extension Fund.
Oh.
Yeah, DCEF is what I call that there. So
that's one of those words of disciples polity we're going to have to leave out.
Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, so let me get back with them to see if I even have space, because if I don't have space, then this is we don't have to rush for 2 weeks from now.
Okay.
I think by 2 weeks from now, what we can have is a webinar date and a title.
Well, honestly,
and a registration.
I would need us to set that before you and I, Katie, get off the phone, because if it doesn't happen for me now, then it won't.
Well, it depends on if it's important for you to have that by March 10th or not. For me, I'm flexible.
The webinar certainly cannot happen before March 10th. But
no, if you need to have a date to tell people
for the webinar, I don't think that having the date for that is, and depending on who we decide is, if the audience is public or because it won't be a part of, I'm thinking out loud, of the New Church Hacks schedule.
Okay. So it sounds like that's not so critical.
Right.
Okay, perfect. Then yeah, we have a little flexibility. So I'll put some, just so you all know my schedule. The rest of today is appointment after appointment, but I will be working on some of this Friday and Tuesday.
Okay. I'll be in on Tuesday.
Yeah.
And Katie, I'll have that profile to you by Tuesday.
Perfect. Thank you.
Should we set a time for another meeting for this group? Or wait and see how things develop?
It will make me most comfortable if we meet often and regular until we get. So the Empower team, we meet every couple of weeks. And so maybe like, I'm not opposed to meeting every week, even if it's only for 20 minutes of a check-in. If you find that to be too regular, I'm okay with meeting like every 2 weeks or whatever. But GA is like around the corner.
Yeah. I'm available. I have a feeling John's schedule is much more
Erratic.
Robust than mine, but it just might be the kind of thing where it's helpful for me, you know, for us to be here and then John to drop in when he can.
Yeah.
And then I can get back to you with particular questions.
Yeah.
I want to make sure I know a slice of DSF and I have a good umbrella vision, but you obviously have the details that I don't have.
So can we do a stand-up next Wednesday?
Next Wednesday.
27th.
Yes, sir. Because I'm gone the whole next week, except for Friday. Actually, I could do the 8th.
On Wednesday, I'm available between 9 Pacific and 5:30 Pacific.
Oh God, there's that.
When is it?
Time difference.
Or I could be available at like 7:30. I have a call at 8, basically, which is 10 your time.
Not if he's in Indianapolis.
Oh.
Jose's in Central, and I'm in.
You're in Eastern. I really want Indianapolis to be in a Central time zone.
I heard it used to be, and then they changed it.
Yeah.
I'm very flexible that Wednesday and Thursday. So you guys tell me everyone tell me what works for you.
I'm flexible that day.
So what is 4 o'clock Eastern, 3 Central? Yes, 1 o'clock.
I'm available.
I'll be on a plane, but yeah, trying to schedule around me is a bit of a nightmare. So.
Okay. All right. So I'll go ahead and send out a calendar invite for that. And then the next time, what about Friday the 8th?
Yeah, I'm not available, but.
Yeah, I'm available then.
Same here.
Okay, so.
The only time I'm not is 12 noon my time, 3 Eastern, 2 Central.
Okay, so then I'm thinking 1:30 Eastern. Can y'all do the math real quick?
10:30, yes, that works.
All right, so I just put both of these as 30-minute check-ins.
Okay.
Perfect.
And I'm going to still include you, John, in case.
Thanks.
Something changes and you can be with us. And I assume, Katie, you'll update John when he's not able to be here.
Yeah.
Sure.
Are we forgetting anything, guys?
I'm really excited. Thanks for being willing to take the leap.
Not as excited as I am.
There'll be a need to be in those. Okay.
Yeah, she works from home and she has some flexibility in schedule if it's far enough in advance. So I'll just include her, and if she can't make it, she can't. And then if you can reach out, Katie, to Sylvia for what you need for Wednesday.
Yeah, I will.
And this gives almost a week for Katie and I to do whatever other sidebars we need on.
Do you want to schedule that, John, or should I text you?
Which week is it now?
Are y'all in the
It's
same
February.
place?
Hey, I could, yeah, text me, and
Okay, I will do that.
but we should give it enough time so that you know what questions to ask.
That's fine. Yeah, I can do that, or email Cassie, whatever's best.
Text me.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Great.
Ralph, thank you for getting this conversation started and bringing
Thank
us all
you.
together for this. We still need to have this conversation over barbecue.
Yep. That's the only thing that would have made this better.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I'm excited, and you are the people with the drive and the content that needs to get out to the churches. And I think we're building a platform that is going to reach a lot of people and fit this within a wider context of educational things. And I think our networks are going to fit very well together.
Absolutely.
There's a lot of complementarity. And whatever we can do at GA to let this be known, let's do it.
Yeah, one of the main things that I'm doing at GA is talking about the future of the church and the future of new church within the church. In all of my workshops and the stuff that we do at our booths and everything. That's a lot of, because there's a sense of need to address what's happening with the 2020 vision and, you know, and all of that. So this is a very much a part of that. So yeah, we will definitely be in partnership with that. Just to also kind of let you know, I'm teaching at quite a few seminaries. And so I just would rather, you know, have full transparency about that. And that is not a conflict. It's just something I don't want you to like see it come out and then you didn't know it. So I'm teaching a course at Phillips. I'm teaching at so you'll see a couple of those, not Phillips, at Phillips. And that's in a few weeks.
Okay.
In that workshop is there. Then also, again, I'm perfectly okay with all of us beginning to exploit that we're working on this project. I'm not the type of marketer to where I feel like we need to wait till some finality takes place before we start talking about it. So I've taken a picture of even this call, and I plan on posting on social, hey, I'm having this exciting meeting, come out. And I'm already following you guys on Instagram and on Facebook and Twitter and everything. So I'll put notifications on so that whenever I see certain things, I can start to share your content more, especially if it's related to this development.
Good. Katie, do you do any of the posting on those?
I do a lot of our Facebook, or I write it and then send it to someone. And Nancy usually does Instagram.
Okay.
For us, and I've been developing hashtags for us as well. So if you, Terrell, if you let me know any hashtags that you guys use, we'll make sure we include those in ours.
The main hashtag we use is CCDOC.
Katie, if you can let the rest of our communications team know that we're going to start talking about this partnership, and we're now even more interested in the kind of content we can put out that supports the new church angle.
Yes.
That's not really a change for us.
Yeah.
But a good thing for us to focus on.
When I first met you, John, my biggest thing was that seeing this gap in awareness for seminary and graduates who have a strong theological education, but not being equipped with the nuts and bolts to be able to build churches.
Right.
And this is so much of a answer to a prayer that, you know, that I think so many people have been praying in the church, whether they said it out loud or just was a deep passion within their hearts, like the church needs this. And so I am so grateful for this time in which we've come together to be able to provide this for the kingdom.
I think New Church is the most important ministry to allow us to reach new people and for there to be a future. And we've been, the first church that was founded by DSF students and staff started in 1962. That was actually a few months before we got our first executive director on site. So it goes way back for us. And this is where our energies are going to go.
Yeah. And oh, sorry, John.
No, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just see the need in some of the things I do outside of DSF. I have a big Facebook group. It's not a ministry, but it's people. It's a spiritual group, and people talk all the time about how there's no church for them, no church could they ever possibly fit into. And I know that that's not true. So I know how important new church starts are, because those are the churches that these people God will call them to.
Yeah.
One day. So I can't wait to be able to tell them, no, this church in your town is the one that might be the one for you.
Yeah.
And we know that education can't solve problems quickly. That we're not set up to do that, though we're going to move pretty quickly on this. But in the long run, there's no problem in the church that can't be solved without education. There needs to be an educational component to everything. If we're going to make this a real long-term change. So our staff and our board will be thrilled with all of this.
I'm sure, because one of the biggest things is when I've gone to Exponential and these other church planting conferences every year, I'm seeing an increase in their vendor booths of seminaries that are setting up booths saying we're offering church planting certifications. Right. And there's no disciples presence in any of those. So now I see. Go ahead, Jose.
Yeah, I was going to say there's no progressive denominations present in those. So we're offering something that's completely needed.
I know in the progressive academic circles I run in, New Church is often considered just a conservative backlash. And that is awful. So we just need to prove it otherwise.
Yeah.
And I think there's a perception that new church starts are all bait and switch. So you offer an appealing package, but then you switch the message when people get inside. I think that's also a common perception.
Oh, yeah.
That we can dismantle.
That is true.
Yeah.
That is true.
Well, and it's often true. I mean, the perception is sometimes true in many churches, but not, that's not what we're doing here.
Right, so exactly.
When we get this certificate going, we will be pushing our seminary students to take the certificate program alongside their seminary degrees so that people learn this from the start. And then we will open it up to seminarians at other schools. If we get the delivery set up right, people can do an MDiv anywhere and take this alongside. And we need a day when most of our church leaders understand New Church at least enough to be a good friend and neighbor to New Church, if not to do one themselves.
That actually kind of makes me think about I've seen a couple of different recent articles about the terminology of church planting. And although that seems to be the most universal way to understand what this is or to title what this is, I'm wondering if in the future that term will become obsolete. If so, will we deal with that when it comes, or should we even think about, because right now it's the most widely used term, is that the best thing to say that you're a certificate in church planting, or is it a certificate in new church, or, you know, if there's some better way to say this? What are your thoughts, Jose?
Well, as I said before, even though I say church planting, what I'm thinking is disciple planting. So like, if you plant disciples, the church will come to fruition. That's how I envision it. And so like, I do think that church planting, the title term church planting will become passé, and something else will come about, but I don't know what that is. You know, the new parish folks, they're calling it, they don't call it church, they're calling it the new parish sort of thing. And so there's no mention of church within their methodology of planting missional communities. You know, well, and even then, there other church planting networks are calling their stuff planting missional communities. You know, so I think it's something that it's good to think about right now. But I don't know where the trend's going to end up at.
Yeah. So in all of my writings, I don't use the word church. I use the word collective. So then, although the word church is more universally known, and the office in which I sit is New Church, even within the disciples context, the word church is not in the design, it's congregation, you know, so, but ultimately when we're writing this curricula, then the word collective is what will be most dominant. So in the teaching, and as I'm coaching the people who are adding to the content, congruity of the content, just let you know, we'll use the word collective.
Nice.
It's in my notes.
But still, like, it's maybe too early to call this, you know, emerging collective certificate, or I don't know, you know. So
Yeah, I'll make a spreadsheet of everything that you've mentioned, and we'll see what's kind of coming forward. That's the way I'm very orderly, but that's the way I kind of brainstorm. And, you know, that's really a question for you guys, not for us, but I'm happy to give my impressions. Yeah. It's an exciting conversation.
But you're the ones on the ground with the emerging leaders, you know, so that's important.
I will
be interested.
John, when you're
go ahead.
Oh, when you're in Berkeley, let's pitch it to the students, because we're talking about general church.
Right.
That day, that'd be a great conversation to have with them. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, we can do some workshopping on this.
That'd be fun.
With our seed planters and our other groups, and see if people are ready to move into a new terminology.
That's a great thing to make a Facebook poll about too.
Mm-hmm.
Like which one of these do you prefer? What comes to mind? Like, people respond very well to polls within. I don't know if you can do it on a page. I know you can do it in a group.
Yeah. And I want to, John, talk about teaching another course for church seed planters after GA. So I'm trying to plan a visit to the region, and it's kind of contingent upon what happens with your new regional minister. So I'm just trying to wait till that person takes place before I come out there. And even still, that's going to be kind of a hit or miss depending on who's chosen, if they're really ready for me. But I do owe your region a visit this year, so. Okay,
good.
And just so you know, Terrell, I'm in Northern California. I'm in the CCNCN region.
Okay, I owe you a visit too.
Come on over.
And we have a number of our students. We have about 30 students in Northern California, and a number of them with interests in new church. So that's a good place. And if you're in Seattle or Denver, you should hook up with our staff there.
Yep.
And a year from, or 6 months from now, in Salem, Oregon.
I wonder where the Chickees their thing that they do in Easter.
Yeah, it was Portland last year. I don't know where they are this Easter.
Yeah, I need to find out about that.
You want me to text Kathy and ask?
Kathy, who?
We have Myers Word. We have a robust text relationship through Women's Ministries. So
you can. I can't imagine her knowing that because they pick these things.
Oh, it's generally chosen.
Kind of late. And I know where. I do know. It's in Denver.
Oh.
Nice. When is that?
The 18th through the 20th.
Of
April. Sorry.
Oh,
it's always Easter weekend.
Oh, got it. How neat.
And then the other rally, the one that I go to, is always Father's Day weekend, and that'll be in Missouri.
Also Chickees?
Yes. That's their two major gatherings a year. And Jose is also heading up a big push towards congregating our Haitian community across the Disciples.
Okay,
so
good.
There's a large concentration of Haitians in both Florida and Canada. So when we start talking about additional languages and contexts, because it's not always just one of the difficult things to be careful of is when we're developing things like this is that we are not forcing assimilation. So how do we add materials that doesn't say this is the way you do it?
Yeah. Exactly. The June meeting, where is that?
June in Missouri, in St. Joseph, Missouri.
Okay.
An hour north of Kansas City.
Okay.
Yeah, when I lived in Missouri, I was in St. Louis, and people in St. Louis don't know where anything else in Missouri is.
Anything else, guys?
Well, this feels good. I'll get some emails to all of you over the next day or two.
Thank you. This is amazing. And I am really eager to see what we can put together.
Absolutely. Jose, do you mind? Are you in a place where you can pray us out?
I can get to one. Why don't you go ahead and just do it, Terrell? I'm in a public space right now.
No problem. Father God, we thank you so much for all that you continue to do for us. We are excited to be chosen during this time, during this project to advance your kingdom. We're just humbled. We don't know why we were chosen, but we are happy that we're chosen, and we are yielded to whatever you would have for us to do in our realm of influences. We thank you that you have elevated us to these seats to be able to do this for your people, that your church will continue to grow and advance and emerge, and that we will be able to properly resource and tool your people to do what they are to do for your kingdom. And so we just are grateful people. We thank you so much for all the many ways you continue to bless us. Continue to do that, and we will give you all glory and honor, for that is due your name. In Jesus we pray. Amen.
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 Thank you, everyone. I'll be in touch and see you again on one of these eventually.
All right. Thank you, guys. Have a good one.
Nice meeting everybody.
Good to meet you, Jose.
Bye-bye.